Hey guys, I am so excited about today's video, and it's actually part one of a two-part video series looking at me painting my favorite character from the Warhammer 40k universe. That is the young king, the youngest wolf lord in the history of the Space Wolves chapter, Ragnar Blackmane. Now I wanted to keep him in theme with the rest of my Space Wolves army, and going with the style I'm going with, I didn't want him to really stick out as being too majorly different, but on the other hand, I do want him to stand out as a special character, the leader of my army, and painted to a much higher standard than what I'm going for the rest of them. So the way in which I'm painting him is very, very different. It is not focused on edge highlights, which is how I'm doing the rest of my Space Wolves army at the time. And it's going to be a lot more of building up color, a lot more layers, a lot more focused on lighting and contrast and just bringing it to the next level as a whole. Now, with that being said, he's still part of the overall Space Marine project that I'm working on, so I don't really have time to just sit down and devote weeks or even months to really perfecting him. So I'm going to do as well as I can do while still being on a time crunch and still having a lot of other models and units that I have to get through in a rather short period of time. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the actual painting. In keeping with the rest of my army, he got a prime in the Fang rattle can primer. Not normally the way I would go about it. I'd normally start from a black, but keeping in solidarity with the rest of his Space Wolves, that's what we're going with. We're going to take the airbrush and we're going to start by applying some Russ gray. We're going to do this slowly because we really want to build up gradients and we want to build up brightness. Now, we're not going to do this everywhere. We're going to leave shadows in the deepest parts. We're going to leave shadows where we want it to be darker. So on these highest panels and really in the mid-tone areas, we're going to put this Russ gray. We're moving up to a Fenrisian gray, and once again, we're narrowing where we're going to put this on. We're putting this on the highest points. We're putting this on the brightest points where we really think light is going to reflect the most and where we want to create the brightest highlights. In order to keep with the rest of the look of our other Space Wolves, we're going to use Agrax Earthshade as our line shade. Now, we're going to be very careful with this. You're going to see me make mistakes here. We're going to quickly wipe them away and try to fix as many of them as we can as quickly as we can. But we really want to be careful here because we've already laid down the basis for our armor. And although we're going to improve on it, we don't want to leave a bunch of Agrax Earthshade streaking it or creating issues for later on. So when we do make these mistakes, we're just going to wash off our brush. We're going to take a damp brush and we're going to wipe it up, or we're going to feather it out to make it not quite as noticeable. Here you're going to see me make a couple of mistakes, and I'm going to wipe them up right now, but what I don't really show on camera is I'm going to come back with some watered down Russ gray later on, and I will fix some of these areas where you can still see right there it's staining, and we're going to fix those later and kind of blend them in so that doesn't stick out quite as much when we do our highlights. We're going to use violet and some whole red by Vallejo in order to create some shadows and to provide some depth and some tone to the armor. So where it would be darker, and we're going to kind of start in some of these mid-tone areas, we're going to take the paint that's really been watered down and we're going to paint it on, but we're going to draw it into the recesses or into the darkest areas on here. Later on, we're going to come back up and highlight some of this up, but we really want to create some color in those shadows with that red and that purple, and really provide a lot of definition to the armor. As we move around, we're gonna do this in multiple layers. This stays on my wet palette the entire time I'm painting this armor, and I'm constantly making adjustments to it, whether it's darkening it up or once I get lighter, going back and forth till I get it exactly where I want it to be. But like you can see, I put it on, it's very thin, I let it dry, and then I come back, and I might come back over the exact same area. I might come back and make it a smaller, more intense area. But obviously the more times that you paint over it, the more intense that color is gonna be, that more purple red you're gonna give into your shadows. With this Arctic blue, we're not really doing an edge highlight, as we're just trying to brighten up some of these areas. So for some of these areas, it might just be hitting the edges, but for others, we're going to widen that brightness, and we're going to create a much larger highlight than just the edges. We really want to focus on corners, any sharp corners, anything that comes to a point or has a really rough edge there. We want to make sure that's highlighted nice and bright so that it sticks out. For this vambrace here, I had to go back and forth multiple times between the shadows and the highlights to get it exactly where I wanted it to be, especially with it being a part on the model that I think really draws your attention if you do it correctly, and you can really make that armor pop along that nice cylindrical shape. For the face, we're gonna mix a little bit of burnt red in with our Pro Acryl Shadow Flesh, which is already kind of a dark color, in order to already start getting some of those reddish tones that we want. Now, if this was a model that I had more time to work on and I really wanted to push it, I would have spent considerable more time on the face, making it much smoother and much more blended in as we go through the stages. But as is, we just kind of want to make it look good from the tabletop as a whole. So we're putting in a second layer here just to make sure that we have it nice and opaque. We're going to leave in some of that undercolor in certain places. So we dilute this violet down to a wash, and we really come after the darkest areas. This left side of his face, our right as we're looking at it, I wanted it to be darker, but for the most part, we're just focusing on adding some color and adding some shadow in. We're gonna add some Sunny Skin Tone to our base mix, and here is where we really could have gone a lot smoother, but once again, with time constraints, I just kind of put it on and we're gonna hit those highlights. We're not transitioning super well. We're not taking the time to blend that in and slowly build the color up as would have been best, and I may actually come back and fix this on the model some other time. But sadly, I just don't have time for it right now. And once again, as I talk about in a lot of videos, Wind condition, understanding what I'm trying to do with the model, what level I'm painting it up to, and making sure I accomplish that rather than constantly getting lost and maybe taking more time than I really have, and that hurting other projects that I need to get done. I'm now going to mix some pale skin and some ice yellow in order to get a really bright color here, and we're only going to focus that on parts that are really going to reflect light. If you look at skin and a light skin like this, it's going to reflect light harshly on the brightest edges. So that's what we're trying to mimic right here. That'll help a little bit with the fact that we've not blended these transitions in super smooth. So that'll give kind of an area that will draw the eye and will hopefully lets us get away with less blending than we should have done. When painting teeth and even eyes, you want to use an ivory instead of a white because it gives a white look without the harshness. We're going to put some dark sea blue into our black just to keep this from being flat black that just kind of has a boring color to it. We want it to have a little bit of color because most of the time black hair actually has more color in it. And in fact, black tends to have more color than just black in pretty much everywhere. But we're going to cover the entire thing and highlight it up from there. We're going to slowly be adding this bright neutral gray into our base mix. We're not going to put straight neutral gray on here, but we're going to add it in and slowly build up these highlights. Once again, adding in more bright neutral gray into our mix, and we go back over, and every time we come back over and highlight, we just simply shrink the area with which we're painting. We get more towards the edges, more towards where we want it to be brightest, and it would have the least amount of shadow. We're going to add in a little bit of ice yellow, and that's just simply to add some luminosity, that's to add some brightness. If you watch someone that's really great, like an Angel Heraldez, he'll talk a lot about ice yellow and different colors and the luminosity that comes with it. And that's kind of what this is it's just providing that vibrance. So for all of our black elements, whether it's the undersuit or it's different parts of the armor, it's all gonna be the same. We're just gonna paint it with this coal black, and then we will build it up from there. This is probably my favorite black. Most pro acryl paints are just my favorite in general. I just love the matte black. I love the way they go on. They're very smooth. I think they have good coverage in the way that I'm looking for it. So a huge fan of Pro Acryl, but especially of their coal black. For this pauldron, it's gonna take us a couple of layers to get this, and that's totally fine. We'd rather it be smooth, and we wanna make sure that we get a good finish to it. So do thin layers and just paint them up in a couple of different stages, and that'll get us exactly where we wanna go. As always, once we make mistakes, we just clean them up right then, and it's easy enough. You can see here, adding a second layer into this to get that darker, and rather than doing it in one thick paint that's gonna leave streaking and it's gonna be messy, it's not gonna look smooth. We're gonna do it in a couple layers. That's gonna make it nice and smooth. We're gonna go straight to graphite. Unlike the hair where we go through smoother stages, we're gonna jump really quickly here and focus on kind of the brightest parts. It creates a very harsh contrast with that black. Now, we're gonna do it fairly watered down in the first stage, so some of that black comes through and it's not as heavy. But then as we build it up, we're just gonna kind of increase the intensity. The sword required me to play around a little bit before I got it exactly how I really wanted it to look, using different colors and trying different combinations. But as I painted this, it was kind of a trial and error, going back and forth with the different highlights and the different shades that we had picked out, because you don't want this major part of Ragnar Blackmane's model to just look flat. You want to add some depth, you want to add some different colors. So we started with our golden brown and we moved into Averland as our main color. This will be the one that will really show through the most, but we wanted that base of golden brown so we get the actual Averland. Gonna do a second coat here because we're going thin once again to keep it smooth. Using orange leather, we're doing this as a wash, and we're really doing it just to kind of change that color temperature, especially as we get to the lower portions of the model. We're also going to use it to paint in the different letters and symbols that we have here on the sword. We're gonna do an edge highlight with our ice yellow. Now, being careful that we don't overdo it here, and we can kind of come back. We're mixing in a little bit watered down here, as you can see, to kind of blend those in together. We're gonna come over the edges here of some of these parts, just very lightly. You almost can't tell, but this is just to kind of mix the colors in so they're not so separated. I hope you guys enjoyed part one. We're gonna have part two coming out here soon, and I hope you'll give it a watch as we look at the gold parts and the wolf on his cloak and some other parts of his kit that we didn't look at today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you gained some insight out of it. Maybe just simply were entertained by it, and hopefully were inspired to go and paint your own minis and have some great works of art of your own. I'd love for you guys to share those with me. That would be amazing if you drop me a message showing off some of your work, and we can make some videos down the line where I show off your work. I'd love to hear back from you guys in the comments or in messages of what you guys would like to see, feedback on today's video, how we can improve our content, or what other content you guys are looking to have. Follow us on Instagram. If you'd like to be a part and help us out with the giveaways that we're going to be kicking off once we're at 1,000 subscribers, go and join our Patreon or go give our giveaway video a watch if you haven't already. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.